Imagine rushing through the busy terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the largest and busiest airport in the world, when suddenly you witness a confrontation that leaves you speechless. A frustrated white pilot is pointing fingers at a quiet black teenager, insisting he's a threat and calling the cops. You can almost feel the airport's hum pause as heads turn and hearts pound, uncertain of what's unfolding. But that's only the beginning, because moments later, the teen's mother appears, an unexpected figure who will flip the pilot's world upside down, with tensions soaring and hidden truths ready to surface. What happens next will leave you breathless. Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta. International Airport is always in motion. On any given day, tens of thousands of travelers hurry along the corridors, eyes glued to departure boards, ears plugged with music and minds consumed by the next flight. It's a place where stories intersect, some happily, some not so much, where goodbyes and hellos blend into a steady hum of humanity. In the midst of that bustle, 17-year-old Isaiah Richards walked alongside his best friend Terrence. Savoring the thrill of being in such a grand setting, Isaiah's mother, Alicia Richards, was scheduled to meet them at Gate D16 for a short flight to Miami. Alicia was a busy woman, always in motion, leaving Isaiah with only fleeting glimpses of her hectic life. She had told him that morning she'd be on a business call when he arrived, so he should wait patiently near the gate. Isaiah was pretty used to waiting. His mother traveled constantly, and he rarely complained. Even at a young age, he learned to adapt, trusting that Alicia's work was for the good of the family. Yet at 17, he was restless for independence and for answers as to why his mother's schedule seemed busier than most. He had no idea that behind her professional facade lay a surprise beyond his wildest imagination. While Terrence bought himself a snack, Isaiah found a seat near a window overlooking the runways. He was mesmerized by the planes rolling in and out with rhythmic precision, pilots pivoting huge silver aircraft into the sky with effortless grace. He pictured the freedom of traveling anywhere, piloting a plane across an endless horizon. His mind drifted to daydreams of becoming a pilot one day. But on the same row of seats, a tall, imposing man in a crisp white pilot's uniform stood with a phone pressed to his ear. His name tag read, Captain Douglas Whitmore. He was in his late 40s, neatly groomed, and wore an expression that suggested he was already having a bad day. Captain Whitmore had flown an overnight route in from Los Angeles and had only minutes to catch his next flight with a glance. Whitmore noticed Isaiah watching the planes and scowled. Perhaps it was fatigue, or perhaps something else. His narrowed eyes flicked over Isaiah, examining his youthful face. Dark skin, casual hoodie, and new sneakers. Isaiah offered a polite half-smile and turned back to the window, trying not to intrude. But the pilot's gaze lingered heavy and suspicious. Moments later, Terrence returned and nudged Isaiah. "Hey, you good?" he asked, noticing the tension in his friend's shoulders. Isaiah shrugged. "Yeah, just weird vibes." As they continued talking, Captain Whitmore approached them. In a low, harsh voice, he asked, "Are you boys waiting for someone?" Isaiah glanced up, surprised by the pilot's tone. "Oh, yeah, my mum." Whitmore's nostrils flared. "And what exactly are you two doing, standing around the gates?" It was an odd question. "People stand around the gates all the time," Terrence replied. "Just waiting, sir. Not doing anything." Whitmore's scowl deepened, as though Terrence's response was an act of defiance. "Well, maybe you should find somewhere else to wait, so you don't cause trouble. This gate is restricted for passengers boarding flights soon." Isaiah felt his heartbeat quicken. "We have boarding passes," he said, voice steadier than he expected. "Our flight's in 2 hours. We're not causing any trouble. The pilot eyed them suspiciously, like he expected them to be lying. Then, with a sniff of contempt, he turned on his heel and strode off. Isaiah and Terence exchanged confused glances, neither certain what had just happened, but feeling the hostility in the air. Just minutes later, Isaiah stood by a charging station phone, plugged in, checking messages from his mum. Meanwhile, Terence scrolled through social media. Neither noticed Captain Whitmore a few feet away, speaking in hushed yet urgent tones to a flight attendant. The flight attendant frowned, glancing occasionally at the boys. Then she shook her head, as though uncertain about Whitmore's claims. But the pilot seemed adamant about something. Out of earshot, the pilot insisted, "They're loitering, looking for an opportunity." I've seen it before. Kids scoping out seats they didn't pay for, or rummaging bags, could be up to worse. The flight attendant softly replied, "They just look like regular teenagers." "Captain, maybe they're just waiting." Whitmore bristled. "We can't be too careful these days. I'll handle it." When Isaiah returned from the restroom, he found a security guard standing with Terence, who looked both scared and angry. Two uniformed officers were already stepping up to the situation, and Captain Whitmore lurked at the periphery, arms folded, lips curled in a thin line of triumph. Isaiah's stomach dropped. Were the cops really here because of them? He hurried over. "What's going on?" he demanded. One officer turned to him. "Is this your friend?" "Yes, we got a call about suspicious individuals. The pilot here said you were harassing passengers and acting aggressive." Isaiah's jaw dropped. "That's not true. We were just sitting, waiting for my mother." Terence nodded vigorously. "Ask anyone around here. We haven't even talked to anyone except him." But Captain Whitmore stepped forward. Confident, I saw them following people, acting like they were going to steal something lurking near that kiosk. Isaiah's hands began shaking with anger and fear. The crowd of onlookers grew their murmurs, swirling in confusion. Tension crackled through the gate area as the officers sized up the two teenagers. One officer pressed, "I'll need to see some identification boarding passes." Everything. As Isaiah fumbled for his wallet, the voice of a confident woman cut through the crowd. "What is the meaning of this?" Heads turned to see Alicia Richards in a sleek business suit, hair pinned up neatly sewn, clutched in her left hand, and eyes blazing with a fury rarely seen in public. She walked with the composed grace of someone used to commanding a room. With quick steps, she placed herself between her son and the officers. Mama Isaiah's relief was palpable. Terence exhaled, shoulders sagging in gratitude. One of the officers spoke quickly. "We were called here about a possible disturbance, Ma'am. We just need to verify some information." Alicia looked at Captain Whitmore. Her expression sharpened. "Is that so?" Whitmore held her gaze, but tried to keep his authoritative stance. "I'm the one who made the call. I believed these two were about to cause trouble." Alicia's eyebrow rose. "They're teenagers waiting for a flight." "My flight. We're traveling together." Her voice was cool, but anger simmered underneath. Unaware of Alicia's true position or identity, Whitmore doubled down, so you say, but they didn't produce any valid proof. "This is a security matter. We don't just let anybody hang around gates without good reason." Alicia's expression remained stoic. She turned to the officers, presenting her own boarding pass, along with Terence's pass, was also produced. Everything was legitimate, showing a flight in less than 2 hours. The officers glanced at each other. "Everything seems in order," one finally said. Still, Whitmore pressed. Their behavior was suspicious. "And I overheard them talking about planes." Alicia's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" talking about planes. They were daydreaming. Probably Isaiah's always been interested in aviation. Her patience began to fray. "Captain, I assure you, you've made a mistake. Now, if you don't mind, we'd like to continue our day without harassment." By this point, travelers and even some airport employees had gathered, forming a half-circle around the tense scene. A flight attendant recognized Alicia and whispered to a co-worker, "Isn't that Alicia Richards, the majority shareholder of Skyline Atlantic Airways?" The co-worker's eyes widened. "Yes, that's her. She's the big boss." News traveled fast through the gate area. Some employees snapped into more respectful postures, realizing this wasn't just a passenger in a fancy suit. Captain Whitmore, however, remained in the dark. No one had briefed him that Alicia Richards was not only influential, but also part owner of the airline for which he flew regional routes. Sensing the shift in the crowd, Alicia turned to the pilot, Captain Whitmore. "Is it? I suggest you run your assumptions by someone higher up before you continue with this charade." He bridled at the suggestion that she might outrank him. "I am following standard security protocol. I've been with Skyline Atlantic for 18 years. I know what I'm doing." Alicia let out a slow breath. "I see." With a single phone call, Alicia stepped away from the group and spoke into her phone. Voice calm, but clipped. The officers uncertain. Stood by Terence, tried to soothe Isaiah, who was fuming, tears of anger, threatening to spill. The pilot looked momentarily unnerved by Alicia's confidence, but he kept telling himself that it was standard procedure. He was the pilot, he had authority. Within minutes, 2 high-ranking airline officials, flanked by a handful of staff, hustled to the scene. One was Tony Harding, Skyline Atlantic's executive vice president, out of breath. Tony immediately recognized Alicia, greeting her with a respectful nod. Tony turned to Captain Whitmore. "Captain, step aside with me, please." He led the pilot to a quieter corner. Though no one else could hear the hushed exchange from Whitmore's reddening face and rigid stance, it was clear he was being informed of Alicia's identity. Slowly the pilot's eyes grew wide with horror. He cast a look back at Alicia, at Isaiah, then down at his polished shoes. The reality was sinking in. He hadn't just harassed random teenagers, he'd targeted the son of his airline's top owner. Meanwhile, Alicia comforted Isaiah, who was still shaken. "Baby, it's all right. Are you hurt?" she asked softly. "No, Mom, just angry," he muttered. Terence stood to the side, uncertain of what to say or do. The uniformed officers realized this was no ordinary misunderstanding. They stepped back, waiting to see how the airline officials would handle the matter. Alicia turned to them, regaining her professional air officers. "I believe this matter has been resolved. My son and his friend did nothing wrong. The pilot here seems to have jumped to the worst possible conclusion." They nodded, relieved to have an exit. With so many eyes watching, they offered quick apologies and retreated from the scene, calling the situation a misunderstanding. Tony Harding cleared his throat as he and Captain Whitmore rejoined Alicia and the crowd. "Ms. Richards." Tony began on behalf of Skyline Atlantic. "We deeply apologize for this incident. We take these matters very seriously. Let's discuss this privately in the executive lounge." But Alicia held her ground by the gate, her voice loud enough for onlookers to hear. "I want everyone to know how Skyline Atlantic addresses discrimination. Because that's what this was, a baseless assumption tied to race and prejudice. My son was guilty of being black in an airport. That's it. This is unacceptable." The crowd stirred, some in shock, some nodding in agreement. Captain Whitmore visibly paled, realizing the gravity of the situation. It wasn't the first complaint about Captain Douglas Whitmore. Although he was a skilled pilot, rumors had circulated about his condescending attitude toward certain passengers. A flight attendant once caught him referring to a group of travelers from South America as those people under his breath. Another time, an elderly black woman had asked for assistance lifting her luggage, and he had refused with a dismissive, "That's not my job," while walking away. However, none of these incidents had ever escalated to a formal complaint until now. This time he had targeted the wrong person. Isaiah looked up at his mother with newfound respect, though also confusion. "Mom, how are you speaking on behalf of Skyline Atlantic?" Alicia hesitated, realizing she'd never fully disclosed her involvement with the airline. She'd told Isaiah only that she worked in corporate aviation management. In truth, she owned 30% of Skyline Atlantic's shares, a controlling stake that made her more than just a manager. She was one of its top executives with influence over day-to-day operations and policy decisions. With a sigh, Alicia said, "We'll talk about all of this later. But yes, I am part owner of this airline. I didn't want you to grow up entitled, so I kept certain things private." She squeezed his shoulder gently. "I never expected something like this would happen to you." Tony Harding discreetly led Alicia Isaiah Terrence and Captain Whitmore into a nearby conference room, away from the gawking crowd. 2 other senior airline officials joined. The tension was thick. Alicia refused to sit, arms folded, eyes boring into Whitmore. "Captain?" Whitmore cleared his throat. "Miss." "I had no idea who you were," she interrupted. "Whether or not you recognized me is irrelevant. It's the fact that you singled out 2 black teenagers for no other reason than your own prejudice." He tried to defend himself. "I was concerned for safety. There's a protocol to follow, and if something goes wrong on a plane—" Alicia's voice hardened. Their only crime was being black at the gate. "Do you call the cops on every teen you see waiting for a flight? Because I see plenty of kids waiting around all day, and you don't seem to mind them." A hush followed. Tony Harding nodded solemnly. "Captain Whitmore, you understand the severity of this. The airline has 0 tolerance for discriminatory conduct." A hush fell. Everyone in the room knew what that could mean. Disciplinary action up to termination. The pilot's face flushed with shame and fear, in a tone that was part contrition, part self-preservation. Whitmore turned to Isaiah. "I'm sorry I misjudged you. I was tired, I'd flown overnight, and I guess I made a bad call." Isaiah stared at him, feeling the urge to lash out, but he remembered his mother's composure. He swallowed, voice shaking slightly. "You can't keep doing this to people who look like me. It's not right." Whitmore lowered his gaze, nodding slowly. But Alicia wouldn't let him off easily. "I'll see to it that your record reflects this incident. If Skyline Atlantic doesn't impose disciplinary measures, then I'll personally ensure it goes to the highest levels. We won't tolerate employees who make customers feel unsafe simply because of their race." Tony Harding stepped in gently. "Captain Whitmore, effective. Immediately. You're placed on administrative leave. We'll conduct a thorough investigation." There it was. The pilot's face fell. He cast one last glance at Alicia, then at Isaiah, and left the room, shoulders sagging. The watchers parted, some pitying him, others satisfied that he might finally face consequences for his prejudice. Once Captain Whitmore was gone, Tony apologized profusely, offering to do whatever was needed to make things right. Alicia nodded, but remained cool. "I expect a public statement from Skyline Atlantic condemning discrimination, and I want a discussion on how to train staff to handle biases appropriately. We need to make this airline a safer, more inclusive space for everyone." She then turned to Isaiah and Terrence with a gentler tone. "Boys, you okay?" Both nodded, still rattled but grateful that justice was being done. Tony arranged for them to wait in a private lounge until their flight word was already spreading online. A few bystanders had posted videos of the confrontation on social media. Comments poured in, some praising Alicia's swift action, others condemning the pilot. In the lounge, Isaiah sat with Terence, quietly processing everything. "Dude," Terence whispered, "your mum is powerful." Isaiah exhaled. "Yeah, I guess she is. She never told me the full story, though. She's basically one of the owners of Skyline." Atlantic Terence shook his head in amazement. "You've been flying on her airline all these years, and you had no idea." Meanwhile, Alicia stood a few feet away, finishing a phone call. She ended it with a sigh, then joined them. Isaiah Terence. "There's a lot I haven't told you," she said gently. "But I've always wanted you to have normal experiences, attend a regular school, play sports, have real friends. I didn't want you to walk around feeling like you lived in a bubble." Isaiah could see her point. "Still, it would have been nice to know. So you're the reason we fly Skyline Atlantic every time we go on vacation, right?" he asked with a small grin. Alicia laughed quietly. "Yes, guilty as charged." By the time they boarded their flight to Miami that afternoon, news of the incident had already hit major platforms. Skyline Atlantic's PR team scrambled to craft a statement, while social media buzzed with flying while black. The pilot, once known for his impeccable flying record, was now under intense scrutiny. In the following days, investigative journalists dug up more about Captain Whitmore's past. Former passengers shared stories of feeling uneasy around him. Flight attendants posted anonymously about how he had once argued against providing wheelchair assistance to an elderly black passenger. The pilot's own neighbors reported that he rarely interacted with families of color in his subdivision, ignoring them during neighborhood gatherings. Skyline Atlantic's management team moved swiftly. They wanted to demonstrate their commitment to fairness and inclusivity, especially with an executive of Alicia's stature involved. In a decisive move, they terminated Captain Whitmore's employment, releasing a statement emphasizing their zero-tolerance policy for racial discrimination. Whitmore, humiliated, found it nearly impossible to get hired elsewhere. Word travels fast in aviation circles. Even with his years of experience, no airline wanted to risk the PR nightmare of employing someone with a documented racial discrimination complaint, especially when that complaint originated from someone as influential as Alicia Richards. In the weeks that followed, Alicia used her position to champion new bias training for Skyline Atlantic employees. She worked with diversity consultants to design workshops that addressed implicit bias, respectful communication, and conflict resolution. Flight attendants, ground crew, and pilots participated in these programs, generating positive feedback publicly. Alicia never bragged about her role in the pilot's downfall, but she didn't hide the fact that she would always stand up for her son and for anyone else. "Facing injustice, we can't fix what we don't face," she said in an internal company memo that circulated widely. "If we truly want to be a world-class airline, we need to welcome everyone on board with respect and dignity." Isaiah felt a shift in his relationship with his mother. He realized just how much she had protected him, though in doing so, she had also kept him in the dark. Over dinner one night, days after the confrontation, Alicia admitted, "I've always worried about the world treating you unfairly because of your race. I wanted to shield you from that. But now maybe it's time for you to see the full picture, to understand the battles we face, and how we can use our positions to fight back." He appreciated her honesty. His anger at Captain Whitmore softened into a resolve to stand up for himself and others. "Mum, I see that you made a big difference. You really changed the conversation at Skyline, and I'm proud of you." Alicia leaned over to hug him. I'm proud of you too for staying strong. It's not easy, especially when it feels like the world is against you. The original flight to Miami went smoothly after the drama. Isaiah and Terence spent most of their beach trip talking about the big reveal that Alicia was a power figure at Skyline Atlantic, and how the pilot faced repercussions for his bias. When they returned home, Terence's mother greeted them both with tears in her eyes, so grateful that the situation ended peacefully. As for Captain Whitmore, his final day at Skyline Atlantic had been the day he chose to call the cops on two innocent black teenagers. He never fathomed that his cool, under-pressure facade would crumble over something so avoidable, his prejudice. But karma had no mercy for him. A new wave of aspiring pilots filled the ranks, many from diverse backgrounds. Skyline Atlantic even launched a scholarship program for young people interested in aviation, inspired partly by Alicia's desire to see more pilots who looked like Isaiah. Isaiah wasn't sure if he'd ever become a pilot himself, though the dream still lingered. But one thing was certain: he'd never forget the day a self-righteous pilot tried to shame him, only to discover that the boy's mother held the keys to the very skies he thought he owned. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of power, prejudice, and unexpected revelations. We've seen how one pilot's quick judgment nearly upended two teenagers' day, until the calm yet fierce intervention of a mother with the authority to right a wrong. A single act of bias may seem small to the perpetrator, but it can carry monumental consequences, both for the victims and the one responsible. If you found this story inspiring or even infuriating, remember that awareness can lead to change. Let's continue to confront prejudice wherever we see it and champion fairness for everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from. Your support helps keep these stories alive and sparks conversations that matter.